Hello there, my name is Clare Balding and I have the absolute pleasure to bring the whole session to a close by talking to a man who has one of the most high profile and therefore most heavily criticised jobs in the country. This summer he led England to their first major international final since 1966. And as we know, the aftermath of that match meant that he was more heavily questioned on racism and violence than he was on his actual job. To me, he is one of the great leaders, not just in sport, but across business, politics, science, whatever you like, because he leads with dignity, with empathy, and with patience, I think qualities that aren't often associated with men's football. And I know that you are as keen as I am to hear from Gareth Southgate about a range of issues. Before we do, though, let's have a look at this clip from a documentary made for YouTube called Raise Your Game.
You're your own reference point. What was the point for you where you started to realise, actually, I need to maybe seek therapy?
I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
And I was crying in front of my best friend, Chunks. And, yeah, man, I didn't like the feeling. That feeling was horrible. Sorry. And then, I just realised I needed to do something about it.
What you've all done with the discussion you had before and that openness, you'd be amazed how many people will look at that and it'll really affect them in a positive way.
Yeah,
England
I think
managers talking about mental health, it's inspirational.
I think your legacy for England as a country and English football is kind of creating that open conversation.
It's so important that we're able to listen and not judge, and that's how I suppose we help people who might be suffering, because sometimes they just want to be listened to. Sometimes we might be able to point them in a direction that can help them, but I think we need that openness to allow people to speak.
And he's here with us, live in the room, Gareth Southgate. Thank you so much. The fact that you get that response before you have even said a word says an awful lot. I wanted to start by exploring the type of leader, manager, coach you have wanted to be and where you've drawn from in that quest.
I suppose we're all influenced by key figures in our life, and if I went in chronological order, my parents, probably coaches I worked with, and then as you get older, you watch other leaders, you watch other, in our industry, other managers, coaches, and of course, I always felt there was a perception or a feeling that I had that you had to be a certain way to be successful as a manager, and whilst I haven't achieved the success that I want to yet, what I've learned over a period of time looking at any number of different businesses is there's more than one way of doing this. And so for me the most important thing is to be authentic to myself and the way I am as a person, and then people will either come with us or they won't. And I guess I feel that at the moment the way that I manage is probably a little bit more acceptable than it might have been in the past, certainly in our sport.
Well, very different to the way I assume you were managed.
Yes. Because I think we've moved from a time in our lives when, I don't know, the boss was the boss in whatever industry it was. He banged the desk, he shouted at you, you jumped, you were fearful of losing your job. And there wasn't in the same way that culture of we're all trying to work together to achieve a common goal. Very hierarchical. Our sport especially has been very hierarchical and still is if you don't really push. If I ask members of staff for an opinion sometimes I really have to push for them to open up, even people that have been with us a long time, because there's still this fear almost of, am I going to appear stupid, or am I going to say something that's going to put my job at jeopardy? So you recognise that I went from being a player overnight to being a manager at Middlesbrough, and the change in dynamic that I felt where staff that I'd been working for, if you like, head of medical, head of all of a sudden the dynamic with me having been the captain to now the manager who can make decisions that might affect their life was fascinating to see how people changed.
In that period of time, you yourself have to change as well as you learn, as you grow. How much does it mean to you, and what do you want it to mean to other people to be leading England's biggest, highest profile sport right now?
Yeah, I think I had a vision of the job growing up. So when I was a kid watching England, Bobby Robson was probably the first England manager that I really remember well. And then seeing how people like Graham Taylor suffered, Bobby suffered during that time, and I got to know both of those gents really well. And then the managers that I played for, I played for England for 10 years, so I saw the football side of it, and I saw the negative side of failure and the relationship with the press, the written press especially. A certain element of our fan base who were pretty prominent when I was playing. So that I didn't have huge enthusiasm for doing that, really. But then as I've gained confidence in the role, I suppose, and the feeling that I felt I could get the football part right, but recognising the power of the position and the possibility to make a difference in certain areas. And I feel as if all of those things have come together with a lot of things that have gone on in our country, a lot of the battles that our players have had to face to get to where they are now. So a lot of things have congealed together at once to create what for us has been a really powerful team, shared experiences that have brought us together as a team. Nothing to do with football, a lot of it, but without a doubt it has helped us as a group within the matches and within the tournaments that we've played in. So culturally we've achieved a shift, I think, from a shirt that people were worried about wearing because of what might go wrong, to now this feeling of, okay, what could we achieve as a group? And until probably the last kick of the Euros, that feeling of it, we can go and do anything, and they hadn't experienced the fallout of the failure, if you like.
They have experienced it now, and the aftermath of that match, I think for many people, was one of the most disappointing things that has happened in sport, certainly in a long time, and that's nothing to do with the performance of the players, obviously, it's to do with what happened. How did you, when were you first aware that this is now something that's really very dangerous, and how did you decide to deal with it? And I mean specifically the violence, obviously, the grounds and around, but also the racism specifically targeted at 3 key players.
Well, I had obviously lived personally through missing a penalty in a major tournament, so I knew that element for the boys. It never crossed my mind that the 3 boys that missed were black or mixed heritage boys. I never even thought about that element of it at the time. But very quickly, when I got back to the dressing room, our media comms team were explaining this scenario. Players was talking to their families about what had happened outside and inside the stadium. So from this incredible experience, this incredible month where it felt like we'd brought people together, at the moment where it all went wrong, the stadium was empty, just Italian fans at the end. We're getting, players who've given so much are being abused, and our families have been through an experience that was rotten. So we were seeing the very worst, if you like, of our country, having been so close to a moment where none of that would probably have happened. And that was hugely disappointing. There's not achieving what we wanted to achieve ultimately as a team. But to see our country in that light under the microscope, because the rest of the world are looking at us at those moments and recognising, it just said to me, we've got a lot of work to do. And however far we've progressed, that one moment showed us how much there is to do. But I would also say the counter-reaction to the 3 boys And the wave of support was also really heartening, because I think that was genuine. And it was a little bit like when we were taking the knee and getting booed by certain sections. The tidal wave and the direction of travel is in the opposite direction. And it's just a reminder that sometimes you've got to live through that pain actually to be able to make a difference, I think.
I think we all need you in our life every day, actually. To take the worst case scenario and turn it into something that is, you're right, could be genuinely uplifting and could make our sense of nationhood something so much more positive than it felt at that moment. How much do you have to help those, and you've referred to them a few times as boys because they are young, how much do you have to help your boys find their voice and be strong enough to say the right thing, and how much are they doing it themselves?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because they're all different. That sounds obvious, but when I grew up playing, every managers wanted to treat every player the same, and that's not realistic. You know, everybody that is a boss in here knows every person that works for you has their own story, their own background, their own preferences for how they'd like to be treated, what they want to achieve. So we have a complete range of lads who don't want any profile off the field and would happily just do no interviews and keep themselves to themselves, to guys that are really comfortable and really able to speak from a position of strength and confident in the messaging they give and want to make a difference. But what's clear is that young people today have that voice. They recognise that voice. They have a social media presence. We're seeing that across any number of platforms. And I think they care about a broader range of topics than perhaps we were had knowledge of, or thought that we could make any sort of a difference when I was playing. So, and they've done it. You know, whether it's been Marcus Rashford, Raheem Sterling, Tyrone Mings, Jordan Henderson, they've taken on any number of different areas and really made a difference. And they should be proud of what they've done. That's been them. I think we've encouraged them to do that when they've been with England. But without a doubt, I think those boys would have gone and done that anyway.
And it means that within themselves, they're not just capable of selling shirts with their name on it. They're capable of representing a much bigger message. And therefore, within every club or within every national team, you are dealing with really powerful individuals.
Well, you are, because when Manchester United signed Cristiano Ronaldo, within 2 hours, over 1 million new followers on their Instagram site. So each of these players that we're trying to create into a team is a brand. They have their own brand. They have their own agent or advisor. They might have their own physical performance coach. They might see their own medic. So not only do the club have all of those people, but a lot of players have these individuals helping them, a bit like a tennis player would with their own wrapped around team. And so if you leave a player out of the team, not only is there the personal disappointment, but there's the possible hit to the brand. And you've got to weave all of these really powerful, high-profile characters into a team that are prepared, as our boys were, to sacrifice themselves for the group. We had 26 players in the summer, so a squad of 26. Every time I name a team, I've got 60% of the squad who are unhappy. And if they choose to go in a certain direction with their emotions and the way that they react to that decision, then we've got no chance of succeeding as a group. So you really had to create, as a group, an environment where they had respect for the team, for the badge, for the country.
How do you do that? We all need to know.
Well, it's a long process. I mean, it's not something that, because with some of these boys, I've worked with them since they were in the under-21s, so you're talking about a 7 or 8 year relationship where the trust that has been built has been over a long period of time. I can say to them, look, I've got your best interest at heart and I'm making this decision because of X, Y, Z. But until they see the evidence of that, and that I'm genuine in that, and they probably need to see it more than once, and they need to see it. Every time you make a decision with a team, the rest of the team are looking at how that decision plays out. How do you so if I leave a player out, how have I treated him? Is that fair? Was it a meritocratic decision, or was there a sense of unfairness? And they register those things. If I say to the team, we want you to play with freedom, and if you make mistakes, no problem. And then I'm like Basil Fawlty on the touchline, bouncing up and down with my head in. Well, I've got 11 subs behind, and the first thing they'll do in the dressing room is they'll say, you'll never believe what the manager was doing on the side. And that's the reality of the workplace. You know, if as a boss you treat one person unfairly, don't think about just that one person. Think about how that's going to go through the whole business, because that will be the benchmark for how people see that you treat other people. And
also the influence of your peers. And we were talking about Cristiano Ronaldo, and you'll have seen the very first meal they all had together with him now as part of Manchester United. All the other players are looking at what he's eating, and none of them order pudding for like the first time in 4 years because Ronaldo wasn't having pudding.
But I think that certainly in football, and I don't know how this would be in other industries, but the peer pressure, peer, we've got experienced players playing for England who are with Manchester United who were excited about Cristiano arriving, and we've got young players who will be looking at him as a role model, and they will be seeing what were the edges that got him to be the level he was, and to be in the physical condition he is at 36. They will look at what he does in the gym, what he does, what he eats. Now, I could talk to them about that, but that would be the same as me talking to my kids about that. That's just going to go, yeah, we've heard it before. This is dad talking. So however much influence I think I've got over the players, the reality is they'll be picking those messages up from a lot of other areas. And for us, the strength of our group are those, there's a phrase, cultural architects, I suppose. Within the group that we're leading, there would be leaders of the playing group, 4 or 5, probably more senior players, who set the tone every day. They set the tone in the gym, they set the tone for the training sessions, they give the right messages when they're mixing with the younger players. And that's really powerful, because you can't lead everybody. You've got to have lieutenants, if you like, who are delivering consistent messages with all of the other players.
You're there as a motivator, as a strategist, as a coach, but you're also there as a support for them, and spotting, and that conversation you were having in the documentary about mental health, spotting those who need to be listened to or have an arm around their shoulder. How do you do that?
Well, I talk to people. I know that's a slightly old-fashioned way of working, because I see most of my players like this for most of the day, and my kids the same.
Usually somebody sat right next to them.
Yeah. But I don't think that you can beat. I love, the hardest part of being an international manager is you don't have the players every day. So that contact is more difficult, and I've got to respect the clubs and the relationship that the club coaches have when they're not with us. But when they're with us, I want to know what's going on in their life, because everything that's going on in their life affects the person who comes. I remember going to watch Aidan O'Brien work.
Racehorse trainer.
And what fascinated me was that he wanted to watch every horse every morning, but before that he wanted to say good morning to every stable
and
lad.
Knew them all by name, about 110 of them.
Knew them all, but also because he said to me, if they're in a bad frame of mind, the feedback they give me about the horse might not be accurate. And I thought that was fascinating, and it's the same with the players. I need to speak to them every morning to see where they are. You can tell when you've worked with them for long enough, something's not right with him. He's not quite himself today. Maybe it's something at home, maybe it's something we've done, maybe it's something to do with the football, might be something completely random that's happened, because we can prepare a team all week, but I know as a player I could have got a call at 1:15 on a Saturday afternoon, an hour and 3/4 before the game, that could have turned my life upside down at that moment. And so a week's preparation could almost be irrelevant if at that period of time you got bad news or something else had happened. So to understand where each player is, what their relationship is with the club coach, other things that are going on in their lives, to be able to get the best out of them, I think the more information we have, the better.
And who does that for you? Who's the one that's there to support you when you need it?
Yeah, that's... So I do have people who I would speak with. So we have a psychologist that works with the team. But that dynamic is a little bit more difficult because in the end, again, he's employed, so I'm indirectly his boss. And of course, I can't necessarily open up to him about all of the things that might be going on because a lot of that's confidential. And over the last couple of years, I did a course with UK Sport where they gave us a life coach. And there was a lady who, this is an area of expertise for her, and I had no idea that so many top CEOs and managers in other businesses work with people that, to me, that was, that was eye-opening, and I assumed a weakness if I was going to do that, and yet it's given me a different perspective, somebody different to bounce ideas off, who's not bothered about the football, because none of the issues really of managing and leading, of course the technical part of football is important, but 90% of your time is not dealing with that. So to be able to mix and then speak with other leaders in sport or other leaders in other organisations is, for me, hugely powerful because you're sharing people like Dave Brailsford, who's having to operate at a similar level of pressure and scrutiny, Eddie Jones. Those conversations that you can have as coaches in a closed environment are really powerful.
Interesting that she was a woman, which just leads me to think about backroom staff and having a bit more diversity within the gang around the team, and also the power of women's football and the power of having women on television talking about football, or female referees, or all of. How much do you believe in that, and where do you think we are right now?
So, well, a few different areas there. I mean, women's football, firstly, where I know the change has come there is that I meet dads who proudly come up and say, my daughter plays football. And 5 years ago, that didn't happen. Now, I don't know if that's that the girls weren't playing or the dads weren't proud that they were playing. But that's been the shift. And I think there is now, and the Lionesses have done this, the profile of the women's game has come from the national team, really. It's now emerging into the Super League and the clubs are taking that on. But really the profile came from the World Cups and the Olympic performances and the stars that were created from there. So I think far more acceptable, if that's the right word, for girls to play now, and more teams, more clubs. Dad's now excited by that. So, I coach my daughter's team and there's a real enthusiasm for it. I think that's different to where we are currently in terms of diversity of staff within the game. So we haven't got that right with my team. We've got some women that work with the team. So we have a fabulous exercise therapist, Suzanne, who brings a calmness. So I know that she brings a different energy to the group. She'll do a lot of the Pilates work with the players or warm-ups with the players. And they obviously behave differently around her. She's older than they are. She's got a different manner. She speaks in a calm way. When you're in the intensity of competition that we are, to have somebody of that nature around is really important. But we haven't got enough women. We did have Pippa with us as psychologist, head of psychology for 2 years before she's gone on to another project. And we have Emily, who currently is our team manager, who is responsible for everything logistical with us. but we've got a staff of 40, so that's nowhere near where we should be. Within the FA, we are actually very diverse gender-wise, with 38%, I think, female, which, as my daughter said to me, is, "Oh, and that's good, is it, Dad?" And I had to say, good point. So I'm using this as like, oh, we're 38% here, and isn't this great? And she goes, oh, you think that's good, do you? Right, okay. And for me, again, it's a great reminder, what world do I want for my daughter? What opportunities do I want for my daughter? Because that very quickly changes your outlook on the way that you view women's sport and the way you view opportunities for women within our sport.
It's exciting to see female voices being given the chance in the pundit roles and commentating as well, within men's football as well as women's football. And Emma Hayes has been a massive hit, but Karen Carney's excellent, Eni Aluko, so many of them. Kelly Smith's been really good for a long time on American television and used here in the UK when possible by the BBC, certainly. For you, what do you talked earlier about seeing the positive in what happened after that European Championship final. How do you get that wave rolling? And what do you want to see over the World Cup qualifying campaign and ahead, actually, ultimately, when it comes to the World Cup?
Well, there are so many aspects to that. There's where we are as a team. So we were 15th in the world 4 years ago. Today we've gone up to 3rd. So we've had a consistency of performance, which is what we wanted. We wanted sustainable success. And because the target that Greg Dyke set us was to win in 2022. He obviously left before that, so all the pressure was left to us. But that did give us a vision to work back from, which I think was really important. So we've been progressing, we've been improving, and we know that those near misses and what feels like failures at the time are part of that journey to success. We've just seen that in the US Open on the back of Wimbledon. So there's the football part, and then there's the continuing growth of the team and what I think they stand for and what they feel is important. And of course, we had to pick ourselves up not only for 3 World Cup qualifiers last month, but we had to go to Hungary where we were fearful that some of our players could be racially abused, and they were. We took the knee, 60,000 people booed it. So, yeah, with the national team, there's more at stake than just the football, and we're recognising that. And the most heartening thing for me has been that the people that have come up to me celebrating their feeling of connection to the team have been Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Afro-Caribbean. The change in that over the last 18 months has been remarkable, and I didn't realise how disconnected we were from those communities in particular. And so that's what this group of players have done. I think they've been relatable, but if we're talking about media, how have they got that message across? Very often they've used their own channels to do that. And it hasn't just been the sit-down interviews with the written journalists who, frankly, the written journalists that follow us are 90% white guys who are 50 plus. And that is the reality of the environment we used to operate in. Now the FA put their own content out, they put their own photographs out every day, so people get a different insight into the personality of the players.
And you can therefore trust cameras that are coming into a safe haven, and your players can have a more confident voice because they know it's not going to be misquoted or quoted out of context.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things is we could speak for an hour and give an interview with a lot of context, and there's nothing worse for me than seeing a headline from a 10-second, I don't know what I've said in the last 45 minutes, but you could easily get a 10-second clip or a headline, I'm sure. And when I read those things, I'm mortified because I don't really want to be somebody that's creating chaos or upset for anybody else. But I also recognise that to say things that we really believe and make a difference, sometimes I've got to ride through that. I've got to ride through some of the less than pleasant mail I received after the summer for some of the topics we did back. And actually that's part of progress, and people have suffered that for centuries, and my players have suffered that all their lives. So if I don't like it in the short term, well, welcome to what they've lived through for the last 20 years perhaps.
The other thing I love about the players having their own voice is them supporting each other and across sports. So one of the most helpful messages to Emma Raducanu after what happened at Wimbledon was from Marcus Rashford, saying, that happened to me playing for the under-16s. I never knew why, it never happened again. And that helped her, I really believe it, think, I don't need to be fearful of that happening again. It won't necessarily occur just when I'm under pressure in a high-profile match. And of course, gloriously, it absolutely didn't happen at the US Open, and the very reverse happened. And he was therefore one of the first to congratulate her, and so excited, I think, for her success. But that's something that never happened before either, because, you know, social media platforms have made it possible for men and women in completely different sports to connect with each other.
Well, I always remember Terry Venables saying to me, how do we learn? We learn through our own experiences, but that's going to take a long time. But to learn from other people's experiences and to learn by reading and educating ourselves, now we're fast-tracking all of that learning. And any sports person can refer back to the failures, the defeats, the injuries. So there's a lot of shared experiences that can fast-track that learning. And why would we think that an 18-year-old would qualify for Wimbledon, play on centre court in front of tens of thousands of people, be the total centre of every media story for weeks, and be able to breeze it? I mean, it's only taken her 2 months more to breeze it, so which is a quite remarkable thing, really, absolutely remarkable. But maybe the harder part for her will be the next bit, when the expectation is a bit different. But to do what she's done is just phenomenal. The way she played, the way she dealt with it all. And from a marketing point of view, she's giving an interview in Mandarin. That's going to be quite... So when we're talking about what that could look like, I would think sky's the limit.
There is also now the badge of expectation around the England men's team. And as you say, number 3 in the world, and World Cup qualifying ahead of you, and 2 matches next month in Andorra and here at home to Hungary. I'm not going to ask you football questions because that's not for this audience. And also, as you said, we could talk for an hour. We don't have an hour. We had half an hour. So all I want to say is good luck in those matches. But I think more importantly, if I can say it on behalf of everyone else, because I hope we do all feel this, keep saying what you're saying. Keep leading the way you're leading. Keep empowering those boys to be the best they can be. And the men in your team who are the leaders are doing a great job as well. And it is more important than what happens on the pitch, but being good on the pitch is always quite helpful as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Gareth Southgate.